First question we had is, what are the different tiers of courts in Washington State and what are they responsible for?
Right. So Washington State has a Washington State Supreme Court. So I'm going to start at the top of the hierarchy. The Washington State Supreme Court, which is the kind of the court that decides the law in the state of Washington. Under that is the Court of Appeals, and under that is the trial courts. So the trial court is at the base or the first tier of courts. And of course, we also have small claims courts, we have municipal courts, and courts that hear different types of cases. For example, in small claims court, there is cases go there when there's a maximum amount of an issue in controversy. And these are for small debts, small disagreements, mostly monetary, right? Small claims court wouldn't hear a case, for example, a family law case, right? So each court, each tier of court has a very specific jurisdiction of cases that they will hear. Issues of really depending on the issue, right? So we have on the law, we have ways to decide when a case and where a case goes, depending on the amount of money in controversy, if there's a monetary issue, or if there is, for example, destruction of property of certain amount, then it may go, let's say, to the small claims court if it's less than $5,000, or into the trial court if it's more than that. Issues of domestic violence and family law issues they are primarily heard on the Superior Court, which is our trial level court. And if controversies are not decided in the Superior Court level, then parties can request for an appeal review, for an appellate review. So they would request the upper level court, the Court of Appeals, to review that case. If parties are unsatisfied with the results they get in the Court of Appeals, they could petition the Washington State Supreme Court to hear a case, right? But in that instance, the Washington State Supreme Court has to agree to hear the case. They don't have to. They can pick and choose. I know this is kind of very big picture because it's very detailed, the details. So if you have a specific question, I would, I could try to answer that. But pretty much we have three basic tiers: the trial court section, the appellate court, and then the Washington State Supreme Court. And that's how a case moves up.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that was going to be my other question, is how do cases move up through there, but you already answered that. So that's perfect. And then this isn't totally related specifically to Washington State, but is that same structure used, I guess, on a federal level as well, of the cases moving up through courts to get to the National Supreme Court?
So this may resonate with some of you who are in the political science department, because this has a lot to do, it has everything to do with our federalist system of governance, which pretty much sets the legal system and a parallel system between the legal system or court structure at the federal level and one at the state level. So that's why in the US we have several legal systems. It's not a single one, right? So we have the federal and we have the state. When a matter or an issue is of state law, the cases are usually always heard in the state by the state courts. The one time where a case can go to the kind of jump to the federal side is when there's an issue of US constitutional law, right? Or there is no clear answer in the state, so the federal court kind of jumps in and helps decide the state issue, but always using state law, right? So we are, there's this balancing of these two court systems where cases kind of have to be defined of what the issue is and really conceptualize where, is this really an issue that belongs in the federal court system, or is this an issue that belongs in the state court system? Yeah. And at the federal court system, we have kind of a similar structure. We have the trial, the trial court system level, then there's the Court of Appeals, and then the US Supreme Court. For the appeals, those are the district, the circuit courts, right? So when you hear about cases being in the federal circuit court, you automatically know that this is the federal system, right? And the federal district court, those are the federal trial courts.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Thank you for the super clear explanation. That actually helps me a lot because I've been trying to figure out how it jumps as well. So my second question is if you've been keeping up statewide, which court seats are up for election this November?
Mm-hmm. So there were 4 seats opened at the Washington State Supreme Court level. 2 of them were contested and 2 of them were uncontested. So I believe that the incumbent is Judge Whitner, who was there was a contested, and I don't recall who the person contesting is. There is also the incumbent is Justice Raquel Montoya Lewis, and she has a contested election.
With Dave Larson, I think.
You might be right. Yeah, I don't recall exactly, but yeah, I think that name sounds correct. Chief Justice Stevens has an election, but she's not contested. And Justice, I can picture his face. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I think I have this written somewhere.
Okay. Yeah.
Johnson?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Justice Johnson. And his election is not contested either. And locally, I believe there's 2 court positions to be filled.
I think so.
Yeah.
I believe, it's Whatcom counties has 2 for sure.
Yep.
And I think, let me see. I was just actually going through and filling out my ballot too and looking at all the names. So that's what I'm trying to remember. But I believe I know James Erb and Evan Jones are the 2 that I know.
That's right. Yeah. So there's 2 positions in Whatcom County that need to be filled. Yeah.
And so why do we elect judges? And I know that I think it's 40 states do this like kind of election system, and then other states appoint their judges, or do a mixture? What's kind of the difference?
So actually, Washington State, we have a hybrid system in a way. So sometimes when there's an opening, the governor is going to appoint a person to the seat. But then when that term ends, or they, let's say they come in at the middle of a term, so when the term is fulfilled, they need to run for election. So we have that hybrid system.
Oh, okay.
But most, yeah. And the reason why we have it is the idea has always been to provide for the people to be able to elect, the judges, for people to have a voice and decide, who are we going to appoint to represent us in the courts. And I think that is the main objective behind that. It is a lot of work for the judges to, in addition to do their work, start doing a lot of campaigning. And as we've seen in past elections, it can be very politicized, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the kind of language that gets shared or challenged, the way a challenge comes up, based on a person's identity rather than their record, sometimes comes to light, and it's a lot to ask our judges to do, but that's the system that we have.
For sure. So when we are kind of filling out our ballots, or maybe for students that or folks that can't vote but want to campaign on behalf of judges, or start those conversations, what are some good qualities that we can look for in judges?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think, what judges do, especially in the trial courts, let's say Whatcom County judges, right? The job of the judge at that level is to interpret the law, to interpret what is already decided. And if it hasn't been decided, to be able to research and gather enough information to help them make a decision that is based on law, right? Even if it's from a different state, different jurisdiction, and things have not been decided. So there's a lot of interpretation on how the law gets applied. So when deciding for a judge, it's important to look at, what is it that they do as a person, right? They, as judges, they have to have a law degree. So we know they're lawyers, right? They have analytical thinking skills. But I think we need to look at, for the health of our community, what are the things that they are involved in? What kinds of cases they've heard in the past? If we have access to the cases and decisions, how have they ruled in certain cases? And if they've never served as a judge before, what kind of clients did they serve? Who were their clients? Who were they serving? Have they been prosecutors? Have they been defense attorneys? Do they have the necessary preparation to be able to think in terms of community health and what the community needs as a whole? Or they haven't had that experience, and they had never served the kind of population that they will be presiding over and making decisions for, right? So that has huge impact.
So what kind of experience then is valuable to be looking for those that might be flipping through like the ballot information pamphlet?
So I think that community engagement is really is really important. You know, do they volunteer? Where do they volunteer? How close to the community are they? Who's endorsing them is going to be a big part of it. And for us locally, you know, what is their perspective on the rights of Native tribes? You know, how do they see that relationship? And, you know, have they had an opportunity to represent tribes? Have they you know, have they had them as clients, either as individuals, or do they know the different cultural needs of different parties, right? Mm-hmm. So looking at those, you know, what they do outside, you know, it's very important outside of work. Mm-hmm.
And then this next question, and I guess our final question that I have prepared is kind of along the same lines. But I was listening to a couple of the judicial candidates talking a little bit about just how their like identity and past experiences would play into this role in the future. And there was kind of a debate on, okay, well, these judges are entering into like a nonpartisan space, and when they're in the courtroom, they're not necessarily representing their own identity, but they're really having to look objectively at what the case is. And so, of course, we also know at the same time that these positions do impact our BIPOC communities or other vulnerable intersecting communities as well. So from your perspective, how do you feel like judges can impact these communities, and then what can they do to support them as well?
Mm-hmm. So absolutely, and the impact is tremendous, right? What the judge decides to do or not to do has an immediate impact, not only on one individual, but on their families, their communities. So it's a ripple effect. So, you know, I think that part of the perspective that judges can take is, you know, we cannot ask judges to not be objective, right? But this neutral objectivity is only a myth, because we all know that we have internalized biases, we have internalized perspectives depending on how we grew up, where we grew up, and our experience as human beings. So, you know, just because we're asking judges to maintain that legal objectivity is not to ask them to ignore facts of life and circumstances of the people that they are presiding over. I think that there's a lot of knowledge, academic knowledge. There's truths about our cultural diversity and different needs that are completely objective, right? When a person doesn't speak English, I mean, that's a fact. That is not a subjective issue, right? That is an objective fact, that if the person is not going to understand what you're saying, you know, that's not a just process. So I think that broadening the understanding of where that objectivity comes in, and allowing the justices to see beyond what they think is objective, and learning those additional cultural objectives, and adapt, right? Continue to adapt and grow.